the very beginning when I first went to the doctor, and not really understanding what was going on with me physically. I was given a prescription for something that's kind of like a tranquilizer, and was told every time you feel anxious, take this medication and it'll take care of it. And so I did that, and throughout this whole season of, from Orange County all the way up to Danville, I had this medication and I took it all the time, and I wasn't realizing that I was becoming dependent on that medication. And so I would take it all the time, probably up to 12 times a day, and it would just kind of numb me out. About that time, our senior pastors were at a conference with Danny. They had flown out to New York, and we're sitting down having lunch with him, and happened to ask him how we were doing and how everything was going. And Danny just laid it out all on the table about how things were going at home and how I was doing. And they told us about this counseling center in Colorado, and thought that it may be a really good thing for me. So Danny came home. There was like a glimmer of hope, and he told me about this conversation that he'd had with Ron and Susan Pinkston, our senior pastors, and asked me what I thought about it. I don't know if we had the conversation or not about how I knew that this had to stop and there had to be more to life than this. So when he asked me if I wanted to go to this counseling center, it was literally a lifeline to me. It was as if someone threw in the pool a life-saving ring. And so I just grabbed onto it and said, yeah, let's do it. Let's explore every option. So the next thing I knew, probably about a month later, we were in Colorado at a place called Crossroads, and going through a counseling intensive. And that's where my life changed. Daddy and I spent 2 weeks in Colorado, and it was probably one of the hardest things I've ever done, but the best thing that I could have ever done. I pretty much think it saved my life. Going out there and being able to talk about where I came from, what took place in my life, and kind of understanding who I was and how I operate. It started to open up these doors of freedom. And I can remember sitting in a chair and going through situations that happened in my past, and the counselor asking me, well, where was God in that situation? At first it really took me back, because I didn't ever really think of God ever being in any of those really difficult situations. And realizing that I didn't really trust the Lord at all because of things that have happened in my past. And sitting there that day and inviting the Lord to come into those painful places in my life and let Him start to heal those places. I'm not saying when I left Colorado, like, life was awesome and it was perfect. I'm not saying that at all. It was like I just had something to hold on to, and I knew that God was there, and I had this hope that I was going to be able to live life and be able to embrace it for the first time through a new lens. There was this hope that I held on to, and I knew that life was never going to be the same walking away from that. And as I started to taper off the medication, I realized that I didn't have to be dependent on that tranquilizer anymore, that I could be dependent on the Lord. And so when instances came, it didn't mean that I didn't have to take it sometimes, and it's there, and it's there for emergencies. I have it, but it went from being dependent on the medications to realizing that I can depend on the Lord, that He never lets me down, and that He's always there. So things started moving forward. I went from being a person that was constantly afraid of what was going to happen in the future, or worrying about what had happened in the past, and actually living my life in the present and realizing how much good there is. And I think that's a huge thing when you're dealing with depression and anxiety. You live in this world in your mind that you're thinking about the present and you're thinking about the past, and it holds you captive. And that's where I had been for so long, and not realizing the life that I had and that I can live. I was able to get off the medication and start to feel again, and have a relationship with Ruby and with Danny, and with the Lord in a new way. And that was really awesome. So if you ask me what I would say to somebody who deals with depression and anxiety, I would say that there's hope. There's some days that are really good, and there's days that are bad. And you know what? the bad days can be really bad. And sometimes they can run into each other where it goes 1 and 2 into 3, but you know what, there really is hope. And I'm here sitting, I feel like my life is a miracle. I shouldn't be alive. Ruby shouldn't be alive. And we are, and I know that I have a purpose, that God has placed me here on this earth for a reason, that I'm not a waste. And even though I deal with anxiety and sometimes depression, that, you know what, it's alright, it's part of my story, and that I'm here to be able to tell that and to give hope to other people too, that there's life, you know? I think sometimes, you know, in life there's that huge question of like, why do bad things happen? And we blame things on God, and we don't really understand like what's going on. And I would be fooling myself if I didn't have that question deep inside my heart, like, why do I have to deal with anxiety? I wish I didn't have to. I wish that it would be completely gone. I can't say that it is. But looking past, you know, over these past 10 years, one thing, you know, that I can share that happened through this whole thing, I talked about how my mom gave her life to the Lord when I was really little. My dad, you know, he grew up part of the Catholic Church but didn't have any faith, really. And during this time, in my darkest hour, where I'm barely holding on by a thread, you know, I'm not going to church, I'm struggling with stuff, I get this letter from my dad, and he pours out his heart to me, telling me about how, through watching what I've been going through and what Danny and I have been struggling with as a marriage, and just through this time, it caused him to question what his purpose was in life, and where does he hold his strength from. And he ended up giving his life to the Lord. And it was the most awesome thing that like I could have ever received as a daughter. So you never know what's going to happen out of the dark places in your life.